just over 24 hours away from round one of the 2026 NFL draft. It is finally here. And here on Scouting the League, we go big time with Jordan Reid of ESPN. Today, we talk his top 499, why it's 499. We talk Styles, Downs, Bailey, Hunter, Rodriguez. We talk quarterbacks. We talk Jordan's favorite position to scout. We talk overall first round grades. We talk Jordan's guys and so much more. Really excited to get to this one. But before we do, make sure you head over, hit those buttons wherever you're listening and watching. That subscribe button and sharing it and commenting are the ones that really help us out, whether it's on Apple Podcast, Spotify, that video portion over on YouTube, which we get some nice highlights of some of these guys we're talking about here today. So hit those buttons, help us out wherever you're at. Make sure you head over to Twitter, give us a follow. I am Rodrik David at RightStepADV is where you can find me. Neil Stratton is at Inside the League on X, and Jordan Reid is at Jordan_Reid, REID. If you're not already following all of us, make sure you're doing that. My website, rsafootball.com. Neil, of course, is at InsideTheLeague.com. You can find all of Jordan's work over at ESPN.com, the worldwide leader, as we all well know them. If you're on the website, make sure you check out thescoutingcommunity.com. If you are a scout or aspiring scout, want to make a mark, need to grab some resources, have stuff for everybody in the industry, make sure you check out our partners over at bluemaca.com for the insoles that will upgrade every pair of shoes you have. Bluemaca.com is a place to do that. Use code SCOUTING20 at checkout. Let them know we sent you. Get a little discount on that order as well. The insoles that will upgrade every pair of shoes you have, and they're just shoes until you get that insole in there. They will be upgraded right away. If you're interested in hearing good draft talk on round one night, I'll be joining my guys over on the Blindside Blitz right around pick 12, getting just before the middle of round one as everything gets a little tighter here this year. Jimmy McPhee, Joe DeCapito, we will recap the first round to that point as well, take you to the end of round one. Always great conversation with those guys. We will head inside the draft room, my 6 drafts with the Atlanta Falcons, what it was actually like in the draft room, what conversations happen, talk about some of the great picks that these teams are making, some of the movement as we expect a little bit in round one. For the link to that, we will have it posted on my Twitter site at RightStepADV. Get that link up there, so make sure you head over there, listen to that. We'll listen to Jordan today as Jordan gets settled into Pittsburgh. Let's get into that 2026 draft talk. Well, here we are just over 24 hours to the 2026 NFL draft, and one of the men that will be there in Pittsburgh covering it for ESPN, Jordan Reid, humble enough to join Neil and I here on the podcast to talk all things 2026 draft. Jordan, welcome back as always to Scouting the League.
Thank you guys for having me. Two of the best in the industry. You know, I carve out time for you guys anytime.
Yeah, well, we
Checks in the mail,
appreciate it.
Jordan.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate it. And we are, again, we're getting close. It is a long process to get here, not only for you getting that top 499. We'll talk about why 499. Again, for NFL scouts, certainly, again, minimum, you're talking 6 months, 9 months of work. Some of these guys, NIL, guys going back to school, multiple years. Again, 15, 20, 25 exposures of film, school visits. Man, a lot leads up to this draft. So again, it's always a big milestone for 32 franchises across the country. But as you get ready for the draft now, again, the hay's in the barn, the reports are done, you're ready to go. What do the next 24 hours look like for you as you get ready to get, talk all things round one?
It's really just making your board, make sure your board is in order. It is officially set for me, and you don't want to create any biases against or for a player. And, you know, reading social media, reading things through the media, it causes a lot of shuffling with people's boards. But once that Monday comes of the draft, I just set it and forget it. I try to do some things to occupy my time. I don't watch TV or anything like that just because there's so much smoke screens coming out nowadays. You don't really know what exactly is true. So it's really just trying to waste time these last 72 hours to get to the first night of the draft for me.
Yeah. And it's again, it's going to be a big one in Pittsburgh. I'm sure it's going to be gorgeous. Pittsburgh's going to do it right. You got the 499 done. 499 seems like an odd number. Again, let's just go with an even one, but there is a reason. Your 499 is out on ESPN. Again, kind of a 7 round format, but not a mock draft. Just, hey, 1 through 32 as we go. 499. Why'd you go with that number?
Yeah, so we can thank Mr. Owen Heineke, linebacker Oklahoma, for going back to school after going through the entire process that took me down from 500 to 499. So I'm gonna blame him for this, but no, I mean it's just an unfortunate number, but I'm happy that I did get to that number. It's a huge accomplishment for me being able to study 500 guys. It's the highest number that I have ever done, but it's an 11-month process. You guys know that I start really in June with everything that I do, and then it goes really all the way through that last weekend in April, of course. So it really is an 11-month job, and it's really fun to see it all come together. And when you form that big board, it's like you take a huge sigh of relief and take that huge breath just because you're done with all that stuff. So 500, huge accomplishment for me, but I'm really satisfied with how it all came together.
Is your grading, Jordan? I'm curious. Are you grading again? You have a grade scale, ranking scale. Are you doing them by position, and then bringing again a top 500 together, moving them around, manipulating them, or is it hey wherever that grade comes, they're going to fall in there somewhere? And again, you step back at the end and kind of see what it looks like. How does it work for you?
Yeah, so I have my own grading system. I've had some buddies across the league that have shared various different scales with me. I found one tweaking some things here and there that's really worked out for me. So I'll use that grading scale for each position. And then I'll have what's worked for me is making a horizontal board. So that horizontal board really categorizes everybody that has a similar grade at the same position as well. Just because when I'm stacking a whole or entire big board, that really works for me, having those horizontal rankings. So I know who's the true first round grades, who's what I call late first, early second round grades, and all the way down to, your priority free agents and your regular free agents as well, undrafted free agents. So that's what really has worked for me. And it's different for everybody, but establishing that grading scale and then categorizing all those guys and slotting them in that horizontal board, that's really what's worked for me.
Yeah, no, it's a
Jordan,
beautiful
we're
way to
we're
do it.
both big fans of yours, obviously, but because you've been doing this and putting in so much work and doing everything you've done, how have you improved, would you say, in the last 3 years? How have you grown in this job since you just I mean, it's gonna happen because 'cause you're thinking about how you do things and what happened. How have things changed in a better way for you, would you say?
Well, I think it's really just finding like what characteristics you really appreciate at a position. And for
Mhm.
example, like my favorite position to scout is corners. And some of the things that I look for with corners, I'm big on hip fluidity. First, you have to know what type of corner they are. Are they primarily a press man corner? Are they a zone corner? And I think that's one of the toughest parts being on the media side, just because we're not scouting for a team or a
Yeah.
specific scheme. So it's really
Mhm.
about preference when we're talking about, and it's not just corners, it could be nose tackles, defensive tackles, three techniques, whatever. We're not scouting for a specific scheme. So it really just depends on your preference with that player. But within that preference, you have to really figure out some characteristics that you value. So that's really
Mhm.
where I've learned a lot. Just finding out what preferences of characteristics that I have at certain positions. And it's not just corners. I mean, it could be running backs. Some people don't really appreciate speed for some running backs. They rather have, vision, footwork, contact balance, some things like that. So it's just a matter of stacking those preferential characteristics that you have at certain positions. And that's really where I've gotten better. Just figuring out what formula works for me. The players that I have hit on, what characteristics did they have that translated the most to the NFL? So really just those preferential characteristics, that would be the one area that's really helped my scouting, my process the most.
Yeah, and I know you're sitting there as a quarterback watching these corners thinking, "Man, if I could throw on this guy, I'd be picking on him with this route all day long."
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's because I've watched them pretty much all my life as a
Yeah,
quarterback, so I've grown to appreciate and know what good corners look like, and it's everybody says I'm crazy saying that corners is my favorite position to scout,
yeah.
but I think that's pretty ironic.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, it's perfect, and you get used to watching them. They're a fun one because again, you can watch a lot of good corners and watch a lot of different styles, a lot of different
Yep.
body types. And again, you think about running backs, they kind of look the same. A quarterback that does, there's different ways to win. You're athletic or thrower, but again, with those corners, you get a wild variety. So let's get into some of this top 499 here because again, It's what the people want to know where these guys are not going to end up falling. And like I said, I love the way you do it. Again, mock drafts for me, again, never been my cup of tea. I love the ranking system you put up there. Hey, these are where these guys, I have them ranked. Jeremiah Love is your number one guy. Hard to argue with that. We have talked Jeremiah Love a lot. I have had somebody ask me, is there any chance a second running back goes in the first round? Jeremiah Love's not going to be number one. He's going to be top 5. But is there any chance a second running back gets into the first round?
I mean, I think the one would be his teammate, Jadarian Price, who played a complementary role to Jeremiah Love. And I mean, we talked about those preferential characteristics at the running back spot. I think he has a lot of those. He has really good speed. He has great contact balance. He has the vision as well. But I think what a lot of people are going to say in the draft room about him that's a huge asset for him is that he returned kicks and punts. And when we're talking about somebody where you're trying to get tremendous value from, that is another feather that he has in his cap when we're talking about somebody that not only can come in and be your 1A running back in the committee, but also we're comfortable putting this guy returning kicks and punts as well. So the more you can do, the better, especially with running backs. But it's just a matter of how much do you value taking a running back that high? And it's going to be 32 different opinions based on who the GM is. And, we've had this debate going back to Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley with Dave Gettleman. There's going to be so many different opinions. And I think it's going to be fascinating. I think one of the biggest storylines without question is just where does Jeremiah Love go? Just because there's going to be so many different opinions. And I think you're right. I don't think there's any way it gets past Washington at 7. I think that's his absolute floor as far as how late he'll go. But Tennessee at 4 is really interesting to me, especially with Robert Saleh now being in charge there. We all know his demise was in New York, not getting enough offensive firepower. So does he get his quarterback, his young quarterback, who they just spent the number 1 overall pick, and Cam Ward some help right away with Jeremiah Love, or does he opt to continue to build up that defense and pass on a running back? I think that's one of the biggest storylines, especially inside that top 10.
Yeah.
One question I asked, we've been working with, doing these shows for the last couple of weeks. And one question I asked Jordan, where would Jeremiah Love stack up in all the in running backs going back maybe 5 years? Is he the number one prospect at running back that you can think of? I mean, is he stack ahead of Barkley? Does he stack ahead of some of the others that have come out of late?
That's a great question. He would be 4 for me. He's not Saquon, he's not Bijan, and I don't even think he's Jahmyr, honestly, just because I loved all 3 of those guys. But I mean,
Mhm.
he's right there with Jahmyr Gibbs,
Interesting.
honestly, and very similar as far as like the skill set that they bring to the table. And once again, it's just about the preference that you have with running backs. I just don't think he has the all around skill set and the durability and the body that Saquon had, and then also Bijan had. I just don't think he can take the carry capacity that a lot of those guys can have coming into the NFL. He's more so of a, and not to say he's a complimentary running back, but he's one of those guys you want to get, like 20 to 25 touches as opposed to Saquon and Bijan. Those guys can have 30 plus without question. We've seen them go on to do that already early on in their career. So I don't think he's quite Saquon or Bijan or even Jameer, but him and Jameer are right there together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Seems like, again, Jeremiah just seems like one of those easy, whoever picks him again, fan base is going to be going nuts there in Pittsburgh and going to be excited about that one. Whoever he's paired with, again, we're going to see a lot of Jeremiah Love early on. After that, in your top 10, man, 3 Buckeyes in a row, but you go Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese. And again, you've got 3 outstanding football players at number 10. I believe you have Carnell Tate, so you had to throw a 4th Buckeye in that top 10. But again, 3 defenders here for Ohio State. Again, depending on what you're reading, the mocks, who's the best player, Arvell Reese has kind of consistently been at the top of the group. But again, plenty of love for Caleb Downs. And then it's just hard to find anything to dislike about Sonny Styles. So again, talk about those 3 guys and just, man, how excited, how hard was it to rank those guys 2, 3, and 4 and get them in that order?
So the first thing I will say, Roderick, is that I don't take positional value into account when I'm making my big board. So how I do it is I really figure out who I think has Pro Bowl or All Pro potential right away, and that's how I stack it from top to bottom. So obviously, my first player is Caleb Downs, and if we were taking positional value into the equation, obviously Arvell Reese would be ahead of both of those guys if you're projecting him to be a defensive end, which I'm not. I'm projecting him to be an off-ball linebacker. But with Caleb, the player that he reminds me of is Buda Baker. Like, I think they are mirror images of each other. They're the exact same size. The intelligence is what really catapults him to that
Yeah.
elite tier to me. And, I've talked to so many coaches, so many scouts that actually have sat down in these meetings with him at the combine, at the top 30 stuff, or the 30 visits, I should say. They said he's one of the most smartest individuals we've ever sat down with. And just think of all the defenses he has mastered, guys, in a 3-year sample size. Nick Saban as a freshman, then the past 2 seasons, or last year, I should say, with Matt Patricia. It doesn't get any harder than mastering those 2 defenses. Those are the 2 most complex defenses that you'll ever be a part of, and he played multiple positions at both of those stops. Then also, I mean, he has the versatility that you love at the position. He's a wrap up and finish tackler, and I get it. I don't think he's Ed Reed. I don't think he's Kyle Hamilton, Derwin James from like a physical stature standpoint. But where I think he catapults himself into that tier is the smarts that he brings to the table. And as a safety, I think that is the biggest hill that they have to climb. Of course, the speed of the game, but also just the intelligence and the smarts that he's going to bring to the table. I think he's just so translatable, man. And Buda's gone on to be a 4-time All-Pro.
Yeah.
And I get it. A lot of people are saying don't take a safety inside the top 10, but if a guy ends up being a 4-time All-Pro, I'm not going to complain about that if we take
Not at all.
inside of the top 10. So he's my second ranked player. After that is Sonny Styles. His development has just been remarkable. Like, being a former safety, you love the size, rare size at 6'5", 245 pounds, really good instincts. I still think he has some ways to go from like a coverage standpoint. I think that's just more so of him seeing it from the second level as opposed to the third level now. His
Right.
feel and zone, it needs to get a little bit better. And then you don't want him in man consistently just because that's just not what his game is predicated upon. But just the length that he brings to the position, he's able to clog throwing windows against zone. I think Patricia used him sparingly as a blitzer, but I think there's a lot more potential there with him, especially up the middle or even off of the edge. And then, I mean, man, the size. And I keep talking about the size. He has a rare size for especially a true Mike linebacker, and the athleticism on top of that. So everybody's used the Fred Warner comp ad nauseum. I think it's great. Another one I love to use personally. He's not as big as him from a weight standpoint, but Brian Urlacher. And if you remember, Brian Urlacher coming out of New Mexico, who's a former safety that transitioned to middle linebacker. So they are very similar from a stature standpoint. So those are the 2 comparisons that I use for him. And then Arvell Reese, he's another that just his development has just expedited during his final season with the Buckeyes. I personally like him better at off-ball linebacker just because he looks more natural there, and I think you're going to get more value from him initially. And versatility isn't always good to me. And everybody keeps talking about Isaiah Simmons and Zayvon Collins and all these other guys when talking about Arvell
Mhm.
Reese. And I believe the
Preach.
biggest mistake that Arizona made with him was giving them too much early on. So we already know Arvell Reese is comfortable as an off-ball linebacker. Once he gets comfortable at off-ball linebacker, then that's where you start to mix him in and rush him off of the edge. And if you paid attention last year, which you guys did, Patricia scaled back his reps at edge rusher just because he looked like he kind of tapered off a little bit towards the end of the year just because of the versatility. It looked to be a little bit too much for him at times, but most of his flashes came when he was an off-ball linebacker, but also you saw he's a really good edge setter as an edge rusher as well. So if you use him sparingly as an edge rusher, I'm completely fine with that. But initially for me, I'm going to play him at off-ball linebacker, that Sam linebacker spot. I think that's where he's going to be most comfortable at on the next level.
Jordan, can you remember a defense that was as dominant as Ohio State's was? And I think it was ranks with some of the best defense we've seen over the last 10 years. But you could argue that their 3 best players were at non-sexy positions. I mean, I'm kind of like with you on Reese. I don't know that he's the edge rusher that maybe some are billing him as. If he's an off-ball linebacker, you've got 2 off-ball linebackers and a safety that were kind of the heart of this defense. Can you think of a parallel to that in the last few years?
I can't think of one, honestly. I haven't,
That's a
just
unique
like
thing.
from distant memory, I can't even think of one right away, honestly, with
Yeah.
this many guys that potentially could go inside the top 10. And I mean, we haven't even
Mhm.
talked about Caden McDonald, who's another
Right.
potential first round guy as well, that was
Yeah.
at the heartbeat and center of that defense as well. So I honestly can't remember, Neil. as far as
That's
a
unique.
defense that had this many elite players at the top of the draft at non-premium
Mhm,
positions.
mhm. Interesting.
Jordan, again, we saw you mentioned Caden McDonald, who again, dominant run player. His question mark is the pass game. What are you going to get out of him in the pass game? Well, the Bengals just traded the number 10 overall pick and signed an extension for a guy that had those same question marks coming out of Clemson and Dexter Lawrence. Now, Dexter is bigger, taller, longer than Caden is, I believe, but again, a massive human being who really developed his pass game when he got to the NFL. Does Caden have that kind of upside for you being a top 32 guy, a first round guy, or is the ceiling a little bit lower there, which kind of ends up putting him where he is in that top 32 for you?
There's only one sexy Dexy, man. Like, there's not a lot of humans that's 6'6", 330 pounds that can move
Yeah.
in his prime like he did. So I don't think he quite has the ceiling that Dexter Lawrence has, but very similar skill set from somebody that he's not just a space eater in the middle. Like, he had 9.5 tackles for loss last year, which is very rare for a nose tackle. A lot of times with nose tackles, you see that they're just space eaters and, eating up blocks and allowing everybody else to make plays or keeping them clean. He's not only doing that, but also he's shocking, shedding, and disengaging and making plays behind the line of scrimmage as well. So once again, this is the tough part about being on the media side, just because if I'm a 3-4 team, I'm completely fine with taking that in the first round, just because the most important position on the defense is that zero technique right up the middle, down the spine of the defense. But, if I'm not scouting for a team or if I'm not scouting for a specific scheme, I'm not really going to value that just because he doesn't give me much of anything on passing downs. But me personally, if I'm a 3-4 team, I would be completely fine with taking him in the first round just because of the value that he gives you on those rundowns at that zero technique spot.
But Jordan,
Yeah.
if I mean, there are a limited number of pure 3-4 teams out there. If he's not selected by a 3, I mean, does he have value with a team that maybe 4-3 that slides into a 3-4 every once in a while? I mean, or the strictly a guy that you want on the heart of your defense, trying to slow down the traffic and keep him off the linebackers?
Well, I think he can play one technique too. Like, he can fit in a 4-3
Okay,
without question. He's
okay,
shown Patricia switched it up quite a bit. They're not just a 3-4 team. They run multiple fronts. So you're able to see him
okay.
quite a bit, not only at that nose spot, but also at one technique as well. Now, one team I love him on is Buffalo. Like, Buffalo at 26 makes a ton of sense, especially with them switching from the 4-3 to the 3-4 this year.
Mhm.
And, this is the tough part, especially for teams. You make the switch like that after drafting a bunch of guys last year that fit in a 4-3. So now they have a lot of guys that are pretty much undersized or a little bit too tall to play along
Right.
the interior. Like, they took TJ Sanders and Deion Walker last year. And I don't think either one of those guys can play that true zero technique up the middle of the defense. So if they take
Mhm.
somebody like a Cade McDonald now, you're able to play both of them at that 4-eye or that four technique spot, whichever one you want to play them at, now that you have that zero technique up the middle.
Great points. Great points.
Well, Jordan, again, probably gives Buckeye fans that are listening a little bit of heartburn talking about all these dominant defensive players, a wide receiver at number 10. We're not going to talk much about Carnell Tate, knowing that, man, we just came up a little bit of short this year when the Hurricanes got him. But again, regardless, they're going to go to the NFL. They're going to keep churning them out. Buckeyes have gotten a lot of love. Caleb Downs, Styles, again, what Arvell Reese has done. There was another defense is really good that's going to have a number of guys taken. Could be one, maybe two. You've got Lee Hunter at Texas Tech a little further down, but Jacob Rodriguez, David Bailey, and the Lee Hunter there at Tech. Another really good defensive group core. Again, maybe three guys that are going to be a little bit of cup of tea for people. David Bailey, some people think is maybe the best true edge rusher. Again, if you want to talk about him versus Reese, true edge, him versus Bain. Start with Bailey. Talk about this Texas Tech threesome and kind of the way you saw them stack up.
Yeah, I mean, David Bailey, he's somebody that was on everybody's radar coming into the year. He dominated at Stanford. I think he had 8 sacks coming into this season. And then this past season, I believe he finished with 14 and a half. So led the country in sacks. So, he's able to get after the quarterback without question. Now, here's going to be the interesting thing about him is just how comfortable you are with the run defense aspect, just because I think it is a little bit hot and cold with him. So for the Jets at 2, do you trust the pass rush aspect right away, and then you're willing to work with him on the run defense? Just to help him get more consistent with that. But you know right away, this guy's going to be able to race past offensive tackles in the NFL. There's no question about that. He's a really, really unique talent as a pass rusher. He's not just a speed rusher up the field. He can win with power. He has a great spin move that he likes to utilize quite a bit as well. He has some really good counters over the inside of those offensive tackle shoulders as well. I think Texas Tech could have used him even more as far as like the versatility up and down the line of scrimmage. We didn't really see that a whole bunch with him consistently just because he was so good at rushing from those wide 9 alignments and those 5 technique alignments. I think he's best as a 3-4 outside linebacker. That's where I see him just because he's comfortable dropping in coverage as well. But he's somebody that's definitely going to go inside the top 4. I don't see him getting past Tennessee at 4, even if the Jets don't take him at 2 or the Cardinals don't take him at 3, just because it's very rare to get pass rushers like that that are ready to go right away. And we know he's going to be able to do that walking through the door. Jacob Rodriguez is really interesting to me, just because he's one of those guys that's going to win you over on the whiteboard. A former quarterback at Virginia, transitioned to the defensive side, and somebody that stuck with it and really developed. He's just a playmaker, man. Like, he's not the longest. He's not going to win you over with his size. But one thing I've learned at linebacker is that if you can see it cleanly and you have instincts, you can play a really long time in the NFL, even if you are undersized. And that's something that is consistent with him. Where he took his game to another level was just the pass coverage aspect. And then he is just a playmaker, man. I think he had 7 forced fumbles last year, so he's always looking to create those turnovers as well. So he's one of those players I think is probably, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes in the back end of the first round, honestly, early second
Really?
round. That would not be surprising at
Yeah.
all to me, just based on the feedback that I'm getting. So he's one player I'm really interested to see where he does end up going. But I would feel more comfortable taking him, probably that 40 to 50 range. That's where I would feel most comfortable taking him. But I wouldn't be shocked if we hear his name called in the first round. That would not be surprising at all based on the feedback that I'm getting. And then Lee Hunter is somebody that I'm a huge fan of, and he's going to be a great test of film versus analytics just because the testing was not great with him. But if you turn on the film, I call him the hub of this defense just because there is no greatness on this defense without him. He is the guy that made the whole thing go just because he's that guy that is that big space eater, but also he's really nimble for his size. And I know it didn't show up in the testing. The testing was not good at all with him. But if you turn on the film, he is somebody that flashes. And you're playing this Oregon game right now. The very first play of the game, he set the tone. He had an outstanding shock and shed rep, and he got a TFL in the backfield. He set the tone in that game. So Lee Hunter is somebody that I'm a big fan of. I think he's best suited at that true zero technique. I think that's probably all he's going to be able to play. He's more so of a pocket pusher. He's not going to give you a whole bunch of sacks, but he's somebody that's going to be able to cloud the interior vision of the pocket. So I'm interested to see where he does end up going. I think he ends up probably going late second, early third round, if I had to guess, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes a little bit earlier than that too.
Jordan, just being a devil's advocate, because you're not the only one who's a big fan of Rodriguez, and I'm not trying to be a critic of him. But you're talking about an overwhelming defensive line that James was able to assemble there in Lubbock. Is he going to be the same kind of playmaker if he's not, doesn't have those kind of dominant defensive tackles and defensive ends in front of him?
I think he has a chance to be just because he sees it so cleanly, and I think that really comes from his background as a quarterback. He understands what run concepts are really trying to accomplish, and then also, formally being in those offensive rooms, he understands the concepts that they're trying to accomplish as well. So the thing that does give me hope is that he does a great job of really twisting and turning and contorting his body against those climbing offensive linemen, just because he doesn't have a lot of length. So he has to figure out different ways to really slip past those climbing offensive linemen. So if he's able to keep his frame clean by consistently being able to do that, I think he'll be okay. But I think you're right as far as he's going to have to consistently have those big bodies in front of him. You feel better about his projection that way, but his ability to see it cleanly and then being able to twist and turn and contort his body to get around a lot of those blockers gives me some hope as well.
Yeah,
Mhm.
beautiful snap of it there. And again, one of those guys that we've seen undersized, high instinctual guys. You playing a 3-4 defense, it's got some of those guys, keep them clean in front, runs great, the ball production, you can't argue with it. Again, Jacob Rodriguez, good fun player again for these Texas Tech guys. Again, this is one where again, yeah, the Big 12 gets forgotten about, especially on the defensive side. But again, all three of these guys are we're going to be seeing them lining up on Sundays, and they're going to be good, fun players to watch. Again, after that, Jordan, let's get into some of the guys that you like, because again, this is the fun part of scouting is being higher on guys and having good reason for it, or being, hey, I just don't like that guy quite as much as somebody else. But again, having some conviction, having your guys. Who are some of your guys in this draft class that you're excited to see where they go, whether it's first round, second round, third round, wherever they go?
Well, the first one for me is D'Angelo Pons, the cornerback out of Indiana, who seems to be the social media darling of everybody this year. Of course, he's undersized. He's 5'9", 180 pounds. I think he's going to be a fascinating draft room discussion just because he's going to be a huge outlier. For those of y'all that don't know who's listening, that don't know what an outlier is, he doesn't meet a lot of thresholds that a lot of teams are going to have as far as players that have gone on to have success or sustained success at the position. But what gives me hope with him is that the athletic testing was great. And if you are undersized, you have to have an elite trait. And he has elite competitiveness. He has elite mobility and athleticism. And then also, if you think about it, the only player this year that gave him trouble is somebody that's probably going to be a top 5 pick in 2027, which was Jeremiah Smith, the receiver out of Ohio State. And he dominated everybody that he went against. And a lot of these receivers that we're talking about that are potential first or second round picks, D'Angelo Pons was great against him. Denzel Boston, he competed his tail off against that guy. And then there's some others that he matched up against really well as well. So, and I'm in the minority on this. I believe he could play on the outside. And I know he lacks the length and everybody wants to slide him inside to nickel, but if players like Amik Robinson and Mikey Samerstill in Washington play on the outside, I don't see why D'Angelo Pons can't play on the outside either. So, and like I said, I'm in the minority in that thinking, but I think he's somebody that can be a consistent outside corner just because of the competitiveness that he has. He loves coming up and run support as well, which is what you always worry about with those undersized guys. He has a huge appetite as a tackler, so that really alleviates my worry with that as well. So he's one player that I love, though. I'm a big fan of Pons.
Yeah.
What it sounds like when you say you can play on the outside, again, I'm being a bit of a devil's advocate here, but then you talk about his tackling ability, and you sound like you're describing a nickel corner. Can you remember having a guy who measures under 5'10" that highly rated as a cornerback for you in the past?
Mikey Samerstiel would be one for me, but I
Okay,
think he came around at like my 45th overall player. So I have
okay,
Pons significantly higher than I had him. But he would be my
sure.
last one that I had. I was a huge fan of Amik when he was coming out of La Tech. The ball production was incredible with him. But once
Mhm.
again, you have to have an elite trait as an undersized corner. Samerstiel had that. And then also Robertson had that as well. And I think he's an even better prospect than both of those guys coming out.
Yeah, again,
Mhm.
it's the conversation. It's an interesting one. You really find out teams that like him or dislike him for whatever reason, because you talk about, hey, he can't play inside, can't play outside. Yeah, we know on the other side of the ball, there's a lot of stuff you can do with motions, tight alignments. You're going to get matchups inside or outside where you're going to be against bigger, longer, true Z's, true X's. Where again, offenses will scheme me up to find a way. So you better find, if he is undersized, you better find a guy that's got some good tape against these guys. Like you said, Jeremiah Smith, he may be number one on the board this year if he was in this draft class. So again, you don't want to throw that out because that's an NFL player. But man, he held his own, competed. He's going to be a really good football player. And again, do you think he goes in the first round, Jordan? If you had to say right now, this is a first round pick.
I don't think so, just because of the size limitations, and I think there's gonna be some teams that are hesitant with taking him that early just because of the mixture of opinions on whether he's a nickel or an outside guy, and there's gonna be a lot of teams that immediately want to slide him inside at nickel, and you're not gonna take a nickel corner in the first round if he's not gonna play outside for you. So I think he ends up going the similar range that Samer still did. He went with the 50th overall pick in the second round, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Pons goes in a similar range.
Go. Let's stay on the defensive side. Again, Mansour Delane at LSU has kind of been touted. Is he cornerback one? I know you've got him as a first round guy. Virginia Tech transfer, really good player. But there's a safety there at LSU that I know you like. Talk about AJ Halsey.
Yeah, so as you guys know, in the fall, I'm traveling around and I'm seeing all these players. And the very last game of the year that I went to was LSU versus Oklahoma. And there's just number 13 is just running around. He's barking at the secondary, getting everybody lined up. In warm-ups, he's leading everything. And I'm like, man, like I love this dude. I love the attitude. I love the tenacity that he brings. He's one of those old school thumper safeties, talking about AJ Halsey of LSU, one of my favorite players I've seen this year. The player that he reminds me of is Landon Collins when he was coming out of Alabama, a linebacker, a safety in a linebacker's body, right at 6 foot, 225, 230 pounds. He's that old school sledgehammer. And if teams were still running that old school Tampa 2 scheme, he would be a first round pick without question, just because that's the perfect scheme for him. But the interesting thing for him is that he has to have a clear, distinct role just because he doesn't have the range that some of the other safeties have in coverage, but the run support ability is where he really does shine. And I think he does have B level range, and you really saw it in that Oklahoma game of where he was able to bait John Mateer on an interception he had over the middle. So he does have some range, but he's one of those players that you want to play more so as a strong safety, play him a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. But why I love him so much is that he's one of those dudes that changes the intensity of your room from day one. He's somebody that's gonna come in, he has A+ confidence, he's gonna feel like he's the best player on the field, and I love that. That's something that I gauge with safeties and corners just because I believe that's half the battle when you're entering the NFL specifically at that position. You have to have the utmost confidence, and Halsey is gonna have that from day one. He's one of those guys that's very, very loud, and I just love safeties that are like that, and I love when they back it up too. So Halsey's one of my favorite players, not only at the safety position, but also in this year's class.
Yeah.
Jordan, it sounds like you're describing a will linebacker. Could he move up and be that kind of guy? Not in more, I guess, in that role, not a box safety per se, but having a bit of some different responsibilities. Would he have that kind of versatility where he could do that?
He could, and you know, the player that they could use him like is kind of like how the Texans use Jalen Petrie in that star or rover role where they blitz him on occasion.
Yeah.
They allow him
Mhm.
to play to the field side as well to cover some tight ends and some slot receivers sparingly. So using
Mhm.
him in that star overhang or rover position, I think that's where he's best suited as. You don't want him consistently playing on the roof of the defense just because he doesn't have the hip mobility and the range to do it
Right.
on a down in, down out basis. But if you play him in that star rover position, I think he could be a really productive starter for you.
Yeah, you talk
I
about the
love Petrie from the
mentality, that guy that
top.
changes the defense. Again, he was Cam Chancellor, Legion of Boom. Of course, when I was in Atlanta, we drafted Keanu Neal out of Florida. That was that guy. Again, we've seen it a few different times over the years. Nick Emanwari's success last year in Seattle. Again, outstanding athlete. Where is he going to fit? Obviously, we saw what Seattle did, so I think it worked out all right for him. So again, you draft good football players like this, you find a role for them, and that's the thing. You've said it a couple times, Jordan. Sitting on the outside, we don't know what these teams' plans are. And again, we talk about, hey, this guy's a great football player, has all these traits, but that can really affect these draft grades on guys like Halsey, on guys like Arvell Reese, D'Angelo Pons. When there is a really specific plan for them, all of a sudden that player gets picked 10, 15, 20 spots higher because, hey, he's got a spot in our defense. We want him. We need him. Let's go get him.
Without question. And like I said, and as you mentioned, that's the toughest part, just because we may see somebody that goes much higher than projected, but they may fit their scheme much more than your preference or what you're looking for at that position. I think that's one of the toughest parts of media versus team boards when they're stacking these things all together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, let's
Mhm.
get over to the other side of the ball, man. I'm a defensive guy. I could talk defense all day, but again, you got to score some points at some point. Again, the wide receivers, we're talking a couple of first in the first round, Lemon, Carnell Tate, again, the Arizona State kid. You kind of like those guys. Denzel Boston ends up there, but there's an Alabama wide receiver that you like a little bit. Let's talk about him.
Jeremy Bernard, wide receiver out of Alabama, ultimate utility and glue guy in this year's class. I don't think he has the upside that as the names that you mentioned, the Lemon, the Tyson, or Tate, but he's one of those guys that what I call just loves to roll their sleeves up and do the dirty work. He's going to be a really good one of those guys you can motion in and be an inline blocker on the end man of the line of scrimmage. He's going to catch everything that is thrown his way. He is a great route runner. Now, he's not overly explosive, but he just understands how to get open. He is great at reading coverages on the run, which I think something that young receivers really struggle with, just because the structure of defenses really change in the NFL, and you have those sight adjustments, those coverage reads that you have to make while you're running. He's already familiar with doing that stuff, and he was patient. Like, he was at Washington with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb. He comes over to Alabama. He waited his turn, and then he had a breakout season over the past few years. But I just love how he has a lot of B-level traits, but he's really smart as well. He's never going to be more so than a wide receiver two, but he's somebody that you love to have as that high-end three or your wide receiver two, just because he can wear so many different hats. And I think he's one of those guys that's probably going to go somewhere, probably pick 40 to pick 60. But whoever selects him is going to be really, really happy just because he can wear so many hats in that wide receiver corps.
Yeah, it's a good one. Again, his teammate, Ryan Williams, of course, was supposed to have the monster year, was supposed to be the guy. Again, an offense that was a bit up and down. Again, we're talking in threes on defense, Texas Tech, Ohio State, three guys on Alabama, starting with Bernard, Ty Simpson, Caden Proctor. Talk about where they ended up for you and kind of what you expect from them come draft night.
Yeah, so Ty Simpson, we've heard a lot about him during the pre-draft process. He's been a highly debatable prospect. And, whenever you're talking about quarterbacks, they're always going to be highly debatable as far as the projection for them and then where exactly they're going to be picked in this year's class. And the interesting part about this year's quarterback class is that the supply is not going to match the demand. And there's always going to be teams that are looking for quarterbacks. But Ty is such an interesting case just because of how small the sample size is. We're talking about somebody that only has 15 career starts. And Rodrik, that magic number is more so 25 to 30 with teams that are comfortable taking a first round quarterback, just because Cam Newton is really the only one, just talking about 15 career games or less, that's gone on to have success that was selected in the first round. And Cam Newton and Ty Simpson couldn't be any more polar opposites from each other
Yep.
from a body standpoint and then just a ceiling standpoint. So with Ty, I think he has to be in a Shanahan or McVay type of system of where he just can be the point guard in the system and get the ball where it needs to go. I think he translates really well, but it's just a matter of how high are you willing to take that type of quarterback. And the team that he's most been commonly linked to is Arizona. Of course, with LaFleur there now, he's going to take some principles from McVay, which he learned out with the Rams. So that's why I think they've been linked so much to him. But do you stay at 34 and pick him, or do you trade into the back of the first round and take him? And then whenever you make an investment on a first round quarterback, you're going to want to stick with that guy. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where Ty does end up going, whether that's in the first round or teams wait to the second round. And then I'll move on to Caden Proctor, another player that is highly polarizing in this year's class. And the biggest reason is just because the inconsistencies throughout the year, but you love the size of the class. Just 6'7", 360 pounds, very physical, really good athlete as well, but a lot of question marks there. The biggest one being the weight fluctuation, coming in reportedly at 400 pounds to camp, especially during a draft eligible year. That's why these meetings are so important at the combine and these 30 visits, just so we can figure out the why behind it. Why did you come into camp, as heavy as you did, especially knowing that this is what I like to call a money year for you, knowing that you can go to the NFL draft? Or was it because you were going back and forth from Iowa to Alabama, making the decision there? Or what exactly happened? And then the next one with him is just the inconsistencies with him. And then the guard or tackle debate. He's another that some teams that I've talked to feel better about him at guard just because of his lack of range as a pass protector, while there's others that want to trust and coach up the flashes of him at tackle. So there's a lot of question marks with him that need to be answered. I'm sure he answered those in those meetings, but I'm interested to see where he does end up going.
Yeah.
Jordan, you mentioned that he came in a little heavy in his draft year. Do you think that's symptomatic of a system now where, in the old days, if you want to get paid, man, you better show out in that last year. Some of these guys have been getting paid for 2 or 3 years now. Is it harder for these guys to get up for their last year because they're already making a little bit of money before they go to the league? I mean, what's your take there?
I think that's where it's important to sit down and understand the player as a person, and then also That's where you're speaking to people like the strength coach and the position coach and the head coach, of course, just figuring out what type of person he is. But excuse me, if I figure out that he has a lack of motivation like that, if he's already getting paid, that's somebody that I'm going to put down on my board just because what
Yeah.
happens when we give you or potentially give you, that signing bonus right away when you're getting, a 30 million,
Mhm.
20 million guarantee, whatever it is, wherever draft slot would take you, what's going to happen when we give you that type of money? Is there going to be continued motivation behind that? And I will have question marks with that. And not just saying with Proctor, but just talking about hypothetically, if somebody came into a money year getting, 5, 6 million in NIL and his performance dwindled, or if he just settled or really wasn't determined coming into the year. That's just not the type of person that I would have very high on my draft board. Sometimes we would take him off my draft board just because of the lack of motivation. I just wouldn't want to invest money in that type of player.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Now, I gotta get the answer, and you've been very artful about where you see Ty Simpson going. If I put a gun to your head, Jordan, is he gonna be available on day 2?
I'm gonna say no. I think he's gonna go in the first round, and I've projected him to Arizona. I'm gonna stick with it just because
Mhm,
there's just no way they can go into the season with Jacoby Brissett and Gardner Minshew. I just don't see that
mhm,
happening. We saw the reports about Jacoby coming out and wanting to be paid like a starter, which is another reason
mhm.
that you probably want to get a young quarterback in there as well. And then Arizona, they have to get a young quarterback in there, man. Like there's just no way you can go into the season with those two as your main options. We know that they have a long way to go to rebuild that roster. And having Ty Simpson, at least it gives you some type of hope going forward with a young quarterback. So I'm going to say they trade up into the back end of the first round. They have a working relationship. Monty Ossenfort and Nick Casario, they have a previous relationship with trading back and forth
Right.
in the draft. So that 28th overall pick with Houston, I would earmark that as a place where they could look to trade up.
Mhm.
Go. There we go. There we go. Well, Jordan, as I'm looking at your top 499, 1 through 11 have 1 round grades. Is that the lowest amount of round 1 grades you've had since you've been doing this?
Yeah, it's the lowest ever. And I mean, that just speaks to the draft class, just because the lack of blue chip talent and then the players that are considered blue chippers are those players we talked about earlier at those non-premium positions. I've never seen a draft class like this. I mean, what maybe one in a possible quarterback in the first round. We could see a linebacker, a running back, and a safety go inside of the top 10, something we've never seen before. So this is a very unique draft class. And the lowest number of true first round grades that I've ever had since I've been doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
After that, again, numbers 12 through I believe 23 or round 1, 2. So you're talking 23 players with that round 1/2 grade on them. Again, a low number before we get our Max Nature out of Arizona State. Our Matt Guy and Emmanuel McNeil Warren at 25. You get Blake Miller, who, man, there's definitely question marks about what is he going to be at the NFL, and of course D'Angelo Pons there at 27. So it's going to be a really fun round 1. What's the guys we get into day 3, 5th round, 6th round, 7th round? Who is one of these guys that you're just going to be sitting there itching to hear his name called because, man, a team is going to get a player that you just absolutely love?
Let's look at my list here. I want to make sure I pick somebody that I really, really like. Um, I am going to go with. Let's actually go with Jamari Taylor, the running back out of Virginia, just because he's somebody that I've been tracking for a really long time. He actually went to my alma mater initially, North Carolina Central University, and he actually started his career as a walk-on. So he was an FCS walk-on, ends up being one of the most productive running backs in school history, and then goes to Virginia and is one of the leading rushers in the ACC. So just that upward trend has continued, and we've seen these running backs come in and translate really right away. So he's going to have to be a complementary option throughout his career, just because he gives you some receiving value, and then also he gives you, of course, some return value and some rushing value as well. So adding him as that complementary rusher, I think he's somebody that you could probably get in that 5th round that I think is gonna go on to have a really good productive career as a complimentary back.
Coach Amari Taylor pick your overall number 181 for you. man, thorough throughout. Again, all 499 are up on ESPN.com for you to go check out with Jordan. Jordan is at Jordan_Reid. For those that are out there that maybe don't want to have the TV on or have the TV on and muted, but want to listen to you, Jordan, where can they find you on draft night, rounds 1, round 2, round 3, day 3, Saturday? Where can people find you come draft coverage time?
Yeah, so I'll be on ESPN Radio. I'll be there all 3 days and very relaxed environment. It's like barbershop talk there. That's the great thing about it. It's not TV. We're giving our true opinions. It's myself, Mike Tannenbaum will be there as well. So we have a GM there sitting with us as well. I love Mike T just because he actually takes you inside the draft room. He always has a story for us. He always loves to talk about trading for Brett Favre, to talk about drafting Mark Sanchez. He brings that up every single year. So I think radio is so unique just because you get that behind the scenes feel from a former GM that actually was in the seat, that made a lot of these key decisions as well. Even I always give them some jokes, sometimes good and bad. I always give them some jokes about drafting Vernon Golston, number 8 overall. That's something I always talk about with them every
Gotta
single
keep
year.
him
We
humble,
joke back
man.
and
Gotta
forth.
keep him humble.
We joke back and forth about that all the time. But that's just some of the stuff that we do on radio, very relaxed environment, but we're giving instant analysis, all 287 picks. We go very deep in detail about each one as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, again, that's going to be insight that again, you want to go get some of that insight. Neil and I certainly have faces for radio, Jordan. I think you'd be fine behind the TV, behind the camera. Again, we're more made for that setting, but again, you're humbling yourself, and not only to go on the radio, but to join us here on Scouting the League. We always love it. Always enjoy it. Enjoy Pittsburgh. Enjoy the draft. Go check out Jordan's stuff everywhere he's got it. Jordan, really appreciate you being on with us.
Thank you guys as always. I always enjoy it.
Thanks, Jordan.
Agents, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, from players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file folder storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now.